Marjane Satrapi was born in 1869, Rasht, Iran, and she's an Iranian artist and writer whose graphic novels explore the gaps and the junctures between East and West. Satrapi is married to Matthijs Ripa, a Swedish national. They live in Paris currently. Apart from her native language, Persian, she speaks French, English, Swedish, German, and Italian. Both of her parents were politically active and supported Marxist causes against the last Shah, but they were intimidated by the fundamentalists. She wrote different graphic novels. For example, she wrote Persepolis 1 and 2. They were originally published in French. And the two parts of the stories describe her childhood in Iran and her adolescence in Europe because she was sent to Austria to finish school. Embroideries was another of her work. Chicken with Plums, Monsters Are Afraid of the Moon, and The Sigh. She has also made some different films, for example Persepolis, Chicken with Plums, Gang of the Jodas, The Voices, and Radioactive, which she played of director, writer, actor, co-director, co-written in the different films. A short summary of Persepolis is that Persepolis describes Marjane's childhood in Iran, where she was exposed to innumerable atrocities due to different regimes in which she lived. During her youth, many of her family, friends, and members were persecuted, arrested, and even murdered, first by the Shah and then by the fundamentalists. She also began to act out, getting into trouble with the police for breaking modesty codes and buying music banned by the regime, because there were a lot of things forbidden with the new theocracy, but she knew she didn't want to follow those rules. And during the war, there were lots of forbidden things also, such as no drinking, no shaving, no partying, no playing, and so on. But of course, not following those rules had consequences. They were more likely to be sued by their neighbors or also arrested and punished by by policemen. So the Iranian Revolution was the center of the the things that happened in those years where she lived in Iran. So Iran was a democracy after the Second World War, and Mossadegh was a prime minister, a popular one. He was revered by his people for his secular credentials and his reforms to combat poverty. Mm, the British government and the CIA orchestrated the overthrow of Iran's democratically elected government. Iranian democracy was deposed, and the US and the UK reinstated monarchy in Iran because they don't. Iran had a lot of oil reserves, and the the Iranian prime minister didn't want it to sell them to the US or the UK. So they reinstated monarchy in Iran with the new Shah. The new ruler of Iran was Mohammad Reza Pahlavi, the Shah of Iran. He was backed by the West and initiated a period of industrialization, military expansion, and economic reforms. But the reason why he stayed a lot of time in power was because of his secret police, the Savak, most hated and feared institution in Iran, because it conducted arbitrary arrests and employed torture for silence and for obedience. So basically, this is the story of how Iran became the religious fundamentalist state it is today. It begins, as many geopolitical tragedies do, with a young democracy with a lot of oil reserves. The 1979 Iranian Revolution was one of the most important events of the modern world history. It altered the dynamics of the Middle East and set the stage for decades-long animosity between the Muslim world and the West. This revolution was an epic alliance of men and women, of liberals and conservatives, of communists and fundamentalists, of the young and the old. They unfortunately were fooled uh, by the new government. And all these demonstrations and all these manifestations were fueled by economic problems and the opposition to the Shah's policies. And the autocratic theocracy, Muslim fundamentalists, and Islamization. So, before the dust had settled, an oppressive monarchy obsessed with modernization had been replaced with an even more oppressive theocracy obsessed with Islamization. Khomeini was a radical Muslim cleric who was a vocal critic of the Shah. He was seen as a spiritual leader by the Iranian revolutionaries, meaning the Orthodox Islamists ones, because a lot of people didn't want him in power because he wasn't liberal, but he was perceived as a figurehead in spite of his not liberal position. So on March 30, 2 months after Khomeini returned to Iran because he was exiled, a referendum to replace the monarchy with an Islamic Republic passed with 98% voting in favor of the reform. These are some of the main characters of the story: Marjane, her father and her mother, her loving grandmother, Marjane's friends, and Mary, the maid, Uncle Anush and Uncle Tahir, the Shah, and Khomeini. Personally, I believe the major theme of the story is absolutely the internal problems that happened during those years, with the Shah, the Islamic Republic revolution, which led to the Islamic Republic, and then the Islamization. Of course, the seizure of power by the Muslim fundamentalists, with the absurd Islamization and the war between Iraq and Iran, with everything that it brought: bombs, lack of food, lack of gasoline, and death all over the country. Additionally, it was so important to the story how Marjane, despite all the bad things that were happening, and with the regime becoming more repressive or oppressive every day, she always knew what she wanted for her family, and for her country. So she wasn't going to give up so easily. She was a rebel girl as she grew up, and so she decided to rebel against her mom and the system by doing little things. For example, skipping classes, smoking, wearing jeans, being improperly veiled, listening to bad music and stuff.